Okay, the final video over Unit 2 here is finishing up on the 6 principles of the Constitution. Remember, we went over the first 5, okay, and just try to review over those, over yourself, just see if you can real quickly remember those 5, all right? And now we're going to go over the last one. Now, the last one is dealing with federalism. Federalism, if you go back to what I was talking about earlier here, I'm going to kind of scroll back just a little bit. Okay, if you go back to the Constitution here, okay, right here, the relation among the states with the national government, Article 4. This was a huge part because remember the states were very terrified of the fact that if the federal government had all this power and they were going to take the power away from the states were not going to lose that power without a fight. And a lot of the states refused to give up their power to the federal government. And even still today, we still have this battle going on between the federal government and the state government, where you have issue after issue, whether it's dealing with gay marriage, whether it's dealing with abortion, whether it's dealing with guns, whether it's dealing with homosexuality, whether it's dealing with marijuana, whether Obamacare, okay, over issue is dealing with this concept about who has the power. Now, the Constitution makes it clear. The federal government is the #1 power. Anything and everything the federal government has in the Constitution supersedes the states. That's the way the Constitution was written. So then you get into, okay, this last principle now of dealing with federalism, and that is the idea then of a system of government in which the powers are divided between the central government and the local governments. The idea of federalism was not to give all the power to the national government, but to divide the power. Some powers belonging to the federal, such as declaring war, establishing foreign policy, making copyright laws, coining money. Some powers were given to the local schools, local governments, establishing trade within their own borders, conducting elections, state matter. Some powers were supposed to be given to both. Both can raise taxes. Both can deal with the criminal justice system of the court system. Both can borrow money, build roads, okay? That's what federalism is all about. Splitting up of these powers so that way, now, the whole idea is the federal government still has power over the state, but in some issues, some areas, the state was supposed to have control of its own power. That hasn't always been the case, and we can go over examples of many different cases where the federal government has stepped in, overdoing the boundaries of the states and taken away some of their power or removed some of their power. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as to why, maybe in class, okay? Now, the division of these powers, what I just talked about here, the 3 sets, again, delegated powers right here, what's also known as expressed powers. Okay, these powers, these delegated powers, are what's given to the federal government only. The ones right here in the blue. Okay, these include the implied, which is listed, and then also what's known as the necessary and proper clause power, which is also known as the elastic. This is the 18th power of Congress, which gives them the power to create whatever laws necessary for the betterment of society, which they deem as being necessary and proper for the country. That's basically what that clause means. So that is why Congress and the federal government can pass laws that are not, listed over here as to these laws, okay, that may be beyond that because of the fact that they have this clause. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this one in just a moment. Okay, the reserve powers, this is the powers that's supposed to be in red here that are just given to the states. Then the concurrent powers are the ones in the red and blue that are combined together. Over the history of the United States and basically this whole battle going on between the federal government and the state government as to it comes to power, all kind of got started back in this court case here in the 1819s with McCulloch versus Maryland. Now we're going to watch a video on it in class, which will basically go through and explain the process of how this court case was so important. But what it came down to was the United States economy was kind of falling apart. The state of Maryland decides to tax the national bank, the federal bank. The purpose was to try to get rid of the bank. The states didn't like the national bank. They wanted to get rid of it. The Supreme Court steps in and says, no, not only can states not tax national agencies, but here's the vital key thing right here. Congress has the power to create a bank, even though it's not listed here that they can do that in these express delegated powers, but it was listed as a necessary and proper. This gave the national government the supremacy over the states. Years after that, from the Civil War going into the corporations and transcontinental railroad building, the Great Depression, issue after issue, time period after time period, these debates have come up over the time over states' rights and federal rights. That's what the whole Civil War was fought over. Everyone always thinks it's slavery. Slavery was the entity of the essential fact that it was really states' rights versus the national government. The southern states were terrified, again, and upset. They were mad that the federal government was looking at getting rid of slavery, even though they really weren't. And when Lincoln got put in as president, the southern states thought that he was going to disband slavery, and that's when the whole Civil War broke out. Today, the Tea Party is essentially built on this concept, this idea that the states' rights are being taken away from them and that they're denying the people their basic rights by this overpowerful, over-controlling government, over entity, and they want to fight it and take its power away. The twist on that, though, is that you still have these Tea Partiers who want to pass laws to ban gay marriage. They want to pass laws to limit immigration. They want to pass laws to tell women that they can and can't do with their bodies or what people can do in their bedrooms. So they still want to have power. They just want to shorten that power to certain areas rather than to all areas. So that's been the debate that has gone on over these years. And basically when it comes to federalism, there's three kinds. There's what's known as new federalism. The concept there is the state and local government assume a greater role in the entity of how things are done. New federalism is the idea of basically the Tea Party. Okay, this is the conservatives love the concept of new federalism. The state and local governments control things. The power comes here. Dual federalism is national states separate and are independent. Okay, and basically you got federal government controls this, states control that, and they stay separate from each other and everything else. Marble cake, this is more the concept of Democrats and of the independents, is you have an intertwined relationship. The two work together in order to get things done. States differ in size, power, wealth, economic, social degree. Where does the line get drawn between these? For example, you have the national drinking age, national education standards, speed limit, gay marriage, etc., which we've been talking about here. Okay, where do you draw the line? Where do you separate between what's a federal power and a state power? That is very, very difficult to do. Okay, but that's the fights that's going on in our society today. So we're going to finish the video presentation with this. We'll talk about more of this a little bit in class and do some examples of it, but I just want to give you the basics behind the concept of federalism so you have it for the test then.